This is Mortal Kombat Advance, which was Midway's misguided effort to bring the fun of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 to Nintendo's Game Boy Advance. I reviewed the game all the way back in 2002 and haven't played it in over 15 years. That is, until now. This is Review Rewind, the show where I revisit my old reviews to see if I like the games more, less, or about the same as I did all those years ago. Join me as I attempt to play Mortal Kombat Advance and rip apart my original 2002 review in this episode of Review Rewind. So last week I reviewed a game called Cruise Brothers, which I called one of the worst fighting games I've ever played. I stand by that opinion, but I want to make the distinction that it's not the absolute worst fighting game I've ever reviewed. As far as I'm concerned, that honor goes to Mortal Kombat Advance, a game that came out in 2001 that I had the displeasure of reviewing a few months later on the now defunct website UGO. At the time I mentioned that this, my friends, is not merely a fighting game. Oh no, this is the single worst fighting game to ever be. So given how much time has passed since I came to that hyperbolic conclusion, I figured it might be fun to spend some time revisiting this abortion of a fighting game. Okay, maybe fun isn't the right word, but I'm curious to see if my seething hatred for this game has subsided in the last 16 years. What has been dropped on unsuspecting gamers is something so awful that it defies all reason. Every aspect of the presentation of this game was so insanely bad that it's hard to imagine what was going on during the months of programming. Take the control, for example. You'd think that you'd be able to move the characters forward and back without any trouble, but that's certainly not the case here. There's a good second or two of lag after each push of the button. When I think back to my first go-around with Mortal Kombat Advance, the laggy and imprecise controls is really the first thing I remember. And then I'm reminded of the terrible collision detection and the fact that projectiles will sometimes fly through the opponents like they weren't even there. These are the issues I braced myself for, prepared to hate the game all over again. On the Game Boy Advance SP, my experience with Mortal Kombat Advance was almost identical with what I remember from 2002. I was immediately transported back to my grandparents' old house, holed up in a bedroom, putting my hands through pure torture just trying to get past the first fight. The year and location may have changed, but the pain the game inflicts on my hand remains the same. There may be a wide assortment of characters to choose from, 23 from the start, but none of them are worth playing. Like so many other Mortal Kombat games, there are a few fighters that use the exact same character models, but change the name and colors differ slightly. You don't just get the classic Sub-Zero, a masked blue fighter, but you also get Ermac, a purple ninja, Noob Saibot, a black ninja, Rain, the red ninja, Smoke, the gray ninja, Reptile, a green ninja, and Scorpion, of course, the yellow ninja. And that's not even including the new and improved Sub-Zero. For as much as I love this series, this is a knock you can make against pretty much any of the Mortal Kombat sequels. Revisiting the game now, I think the selection of characters is actually one of the bright spots. Sure, it has a few too many masked ninjas, but it also has pretty much everybody from Mortal Kombat 3, including Cyrix, Nightwolf, Sindel, Stryker, and Mileena. I mean, these aren't great characters, and they look terrible on the Game Boy Advance, but you gotta admit, it is a wonderfully varied selection of fighters. I get the feeling the developer Virtue Craft would have been better off removing some of the clutter and focusing on maybe 10 or 12 characters. They may have modeled a couple dozen fighters, but they certainly didn't have enough time to make sure everybody felt unique. None of these characters are easy to control, and their moves are nearly impossible to pull off on the original hardware. Also, there are barely any moves, the balance is all off, and the fatalities all suck. Actually, that reminds me of something I said in the original review. The problem is, no matter how many fatalities and friendships you do, none feature the dark mood of the original two Mortal Kombats, and none are humorous either. They're also poorly drawn and animated. When a character is blown up, for example, the bones are tossed all about, but not actually on the ground. Some bones just float there, while other bones mysteriously fall through the ground. There are a number of these glitches scattered throughout the fatalities. 16 years ago, the most I could do was simply tell you how dumb the fatalities were. Now, thanks to streaming video, I'm able to show you. Here's a montage of just a few of the fatalities found in Mortal Kombat Advance. So a funny thing happened to me as I went to capture footage for this episode of Review Rewind. As I mentioned before, I decided to pull out my original cartridge in my Game Boy Advance to get the proper experience, but had to turn to emulation in order to get the footage needed for this episode. I don't know if it's the version of the game I found online or the fact that I was using a PlayStation 4 controller, but I found Mortal Kombat Advance to be significantly easier to play on the computer. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing you can do to make Mortal Kombat Advance a good fighting game. But with the DualShock 4 and a save button, I was able to make progress and see parts of the game I didn't even know existed. I was finally able to see Motaro in all of his glory. I also discovered that you could spam Shao Kahn to death by simply throwing fireballs until he dies. But don't let up, because he has this uncanny ability to kill you in just a couple of seconds. Had this been the way I experienced Mortal Kombat Advance, I can tell you right now that my review would have been a lot less scathing. And the truth is, I have a hunch that my original review was a lot worse than what I can show you here. This is one of those cases where the site I freelanced for went out of business, and a lot of those old reviews have been lost forever. I was able to salvage 2 of the 3 pages of my 2002 review, but I can't seem to access that final page. But even with only 2 pages, my original review was a staggering 943 words on Mortal Kombat Advance. There's a good chance that this dumb write-up is actually longer than my Yakuza 6 review. How much energy did I have in 2002? So, this is one of those rare cases where I'm not actually sure if my opinion has changed or not. On one hand, my original cartridge is every bit as bad as I remember. It has awful collision detection, moves that are hard to pull off, and so many bugs that you wonder if anybody even tested it before the game was released. On the other hand, the emulated version I downloaded seemed a bit more stable and didn't have characters literally falling through the floor for no reason. I mean, if you have a choice between those two, then play neither. Now, before I cut to black, I wanted to highlight one part of Mortal Kombat Advance that showed up in both versions I played. At least half of the matches end with you kicking your opponent flat to the ground, only to have him get back up and then fall back down once the computer realizes that you've already depleted his health. Now, where have I heard that before? I was amused that when you knock somebody out, they'll get punched to the ground, stand back up, and then fall back down. This happened pretty much every round in every fight. It's a mess. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of Review Rewind. So here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite Mortal Kombat game? After spending so much time playing this crap fest, I want to hear about some good games. For years, my pick was always Mortal Kombat 2, but these days I think I'd go with Mortal Kombat 9. Specifically the PS Vita version, which had all the bonus characters and an extra challenge tower that you couldn't find anywhere else. Let me hear your thoughts in the comments below. In other news, I'm currently hard at work on 2 April Fool's features. One of them is informative, I'll say that much. The other one is, well, it's ambitious. Don't worry, it's not a fake out or anything dishonest. You'll see what I mean. All that is happening next week, so I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.